just add your organization so people can see where you're from. Some people I've noticed have already done that, which is great. If you could, as I said, keep yourself on mute if you're not being called to speak. And if anything happens and you just want to make a comment or respond to something that people are saying, just please drop it in the chat. And then if you're invited to talk, then you can unmute yourself just by clicking on the little button that you click to mute yourself, and we can also help out. And then the last thing is, if you want to go, if you hover over, there's speaker view or there's gallery view. So speaker view, you can just see the person who's talking, and gallery view, you can see all the little icons of everyone who's on the call. So you can choose which mode you'd like to watch the session on. I think those are the main kind of key things. If you've got any queries, as I said, I'm sort of here as tech support. So just drop me a note and I'll try and help you out. But otherwise, unless anyone's got any questions that they want to ask immediately, I'm just going to hand over to Jamie to do the proper welcomes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna. So I've been asked by UnLtd to be a bit of a facilitator for this conversation. So just to introduce myself, I'm Jamie. I've kind of got a bit of two hats. So I run Social Supermarket, which is an e-commerce site for social enterprise brands. A number of you who are on the call, actually, who we've worked with, we both put together kind of gift hampers for corporates. We also have over 60 brands, social enterprise brands, retail brands featured on our site. We started about a year and a half ago. And we also have a kind of partnership with UnLtd where we try and support a number of the kind of retail sector organizations. We're obviously quite a new organization, a lot younger than a lot of those on this call, who I'm sure have a lot more experience than me in some of this space. But it does give me the advantage of having a bit of an overview of some of the challenges that our suppliers are facing, some of the pivots they've managed to make. I know obviously everyone is struggling a lot in this space, but I think it's also an opportunity to really look at actually some of the examples of organizations who have used this opportunity to find more sales potentially through online or develop new products and services. So I guess today, I think what we're going to do is having a bit of an open conversation. We had a few submissions in advance of this of what people would like to get out of this conversation. And we're going to talk about that for the next, I think, 25 minutes. So I'd really encourage everyone to chip in and give some of their viewpoints of what they've seen in the sector, some of the challenges, but also potentially opportunities as well during this period for the next 25, 30 minutes. Then I'll be passing over to Catherine, who is an expert in the retail space, who will be talking about kind of practical ways that you can address some of the challenges. And then we're going to respond to that. So when I looked over some of the submissions in advance of this, I guess there were kind of two main themes that people were interested in. The first was, I guess, a bit of understanding of just what everyone else is going through. Getting a bit of a sense of how everyone else is faring in this space during this time. And the second area was, I guess, that kind of piece of advice. So understanding where there are potential grants for social enterprises out there, or potential funding streams. And then also potentially examples of pivots. So I thought I might kick off with one example of a social enterprise that I've seen in this space, potentially kind of changing how their business model works. And that's a jewelry brand who we work with called Pivot, very aptly named for this time. And they normally produce jewelry like rings, necklaces, and they've created actually bookmarks now, which have emblazed soon as a kind of way to send little gifts to friends and family. They've set up about 6 months ago, so obviously particularly vulnerable because they're very new enterprise. They're mainly based online. Jewelry's seen a massive reduction. They've managed to turn this into a significant part of their business. So I think 80% of their sales now come from these single bookmarks that people have been sending to each other. But I'd love to just start with a bit, I guess, a kind of positive note of any other examples that you guys may have seen in this space of where organizations have pivoted. So I don't know, it's quite hard sometimes to navigate this, but either if people want to just come off mute and give some examples of positive stories they might have seen in the space. Yes.
Hiya. We've managed to do things slightly differently. We run a variety of projects, and one of them is our cafe. The other projects that we run are support with people with dementia. But I just want to focus sort of on the retail bit today, which is obviously our cafe. And we knew that we were going to go into lockdown, and we knew that we were going to have to close probably a week. Emma will give me some guidance. Probably a week, 2 weeks before we actually did. The cafe team have regular customers that come in all the time. It's mainly older people, mainly people that live alone, mainly people that are isolated. And the team managed to collect telephone numbers from people who they knew were isolated. They have then managed to set up regular welfare check calls, but also enabled us to gain a grant to get some iPads to connect them with their families too, but also to have cafe customer Zoom calls, which is what they're doing. That keeps them engaged in what we're doing, but it also enables them to engage in others. Now, that doesn't bring us any revenue. Obviously, there's a grant for us to enable to do that. But what it may do is actually keep our customers engaged for ready for when we do open.
Brilliant, thanks so much. No, that's a fantastic example. And likewise, we'd love to hear any other examples of pivots. Whether anyone's come across particular grants or sources of funding as well that they've been successful with during this period.
We've started making recipe kits. So instead of just sending our products out, there's a lot of people that are obviously homeschooling and things, and taking the opportunity to teach about fair trade and social enterprise and things through the recipe kits that we're sending out, so people can get involved in making instead of just sending out already pre-packaged products that we usually do.
Fantastic, brilliant example. Thanks, Tara. Any other contributions on, I guess, examples of pivots? I think, Sam, you've come off.
Yeah, well, we run a venue in York which has about 20 different businesses, kind of socially minded, creative businesses, retails, food and drink as well as a large part of our cluster, if you like, of businesses. And obviously, with lockdown, there's been a significant transition towards delivery food businesses who have gone onto traditional platforms. For food businesses, those that use things like Deliveroo, they're often commission of about 30 or 40% just to sell your products on them, which was prohibitive and was a non-starter for a lot of the businesses that co-sparked their homes. So how we did it was we decided to manage the delivery ourselves. We still use Deliveroo and those platforms to sell products, but because we manage our own delivery, the commission rate's down at now 10%, which is a much more manageable figure. And how we've done it is that we've partnered with a local taxi firm who deliver the food rather than Deliveroo. So the taxi firm themselves were about 90% down on their trade, and the customer pays a delivery fee for the food, and that delivery fee goes exclusively to the taxi firm, whereas the business that's trading only pays 10% commission. So it's a lot more financially worthwhile for the business to sell their products, while also it ensures that the taxi drivers are making good money from delivering the food rather than, say, Deliveroo. So it's been really busy for us. We were trying to hold off because you've still got a lot of people within a relatively small proximity. So while we've been adhering to social distancing, we tried to hold off really as long as we could, because we didn't want to get 10 businesses within a fairly short radius. But no, we've been doing probably about an order every 60 seconds. It's probably been several thousand for each of the businesses that they've made in the last 3 weeks. So it's been it's allowed them to kind of keep ticking over, and with the grants that they've received as well for occupying some of our spaces, it's kind of kept them tying over. And for us, we've been able to continue our revenue or most of our revenue based on that happening, really. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't Deliveroo that benefited from the delivery kind of hype, but actually the businesses and a taxi firm would benefit instead. So it's been good.
That's a brilliant example. Thank you very much. Is that, and just out of interest, how does that compare? Did you have a delivery model beforehand, or is that completely new?
Yeah, we didn't. Some of the businesses individually had delivery models that they could use, and they did it themselves. We thought surely collectivising it as an approach, we could pass on those savings, and it kind of forced us to pivot. So our hope is to try and keep that going as we reopen as a venue. But it's it's a fairly intensive process, but it's been successful. But it's something we'd like to keep going if we can going forward.
Fantastic. And any other cafes, I guess, who have moved to a delivery model in terms of their food? Pravin, I think I just saw your hand.
My name is Pravin. I run a coffee shop called Canvas Coffee in Portsmouth. We're in a train station, and it's coincidence really. I've been roasting coffee as a little side hustle for 5 years, and we had a website for 18 months, but we never really pushed it because it wasn't really something that I was that motivated to push online. But since the lockdown happened, our sales have gone up a staggering amount, really. I think I've sold about $5,000 worth of coffee in the last 60 days, which is nothing compared to what our shop sales are. But in terms of what we were doing before, it's not something you would kind of turn away or anything. So I've basically just moved to, everyone's been furloughed. I come into the shop every day, pack orders, and ship them out, and I try and get them out on the same day, and I'm going to hand deliver them if they're local, or post them. And there's a health food shop as well that started stocking our coffee, and they've sold an absolute load. And this morning I got an inquiry from another, not health food shop, like a kind of a vegan sort of supermarket kind of thing locally, and they asked us if we would stock them as well. So it seems like loads of people are buying retail coffee, and I think it's more luck really that we roasted and we're able to roast and sell coffee.
I guess the e-commerce point is a really significant one as well, given that the country, I think, is up to about 26% of people now shopping online, if not higher, and that's the highest rate we've ever seen, and it's one of those trends which is likely to not reverse. I think it's also a kind of really interesting point because it's something that I've seen across the spectrum of a number of suppliers who we work with who often stock both cafes, bars, and have, as you said, it hasn't substituted the amount of revenue they bring in as normal business, but it has increased staggeringly over the last couple of months. Norita, I think I might have seen your hand go up. I don't know.
Sorry, no, I was just going to the opportunity. We haven't yet started into the online sales, but I'm hoping to do that hopefully by the end of this week. We have been preparing for it. But my main question was for deliveries that you can't do in person. I was just going to ask, presumably somebody here has done the homework on which is the cheapest way to ship. So I was just going to ask if you could let me know what that is.
I think at the top of my head, I think Hermes is reasonably good, but they all come a different. I guess it depends on different preference methods in terms of tracking, first class, all those kind of elements.
I've run an online business, so I ship everything or hand deliver. The easiest thing to do, especially in these times, I've found is post office do a drop and go card, so you can top it up like you top up a SIM card or something, and you can just go and drop all of your parcels off, and the post office will just process them throughout the day. So it limits your contact as well then. I've heard a few iffy things about Hermes, but if it's more expensive items or you want them fully tracked and things, DPD are one of the best.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
It's worth looking into what is the best one for the right size. So I noticed that Royal Mail put their prices up like when the lockdown started. So I think everything went up by about 10p, or at least to me it did. And but there are certain packages that are better to go DPD. So if it's over 2 kilos, then I think it's DPD's better than Royal Mail. Royal Mail's really expensive when it gets over 2 kilos.
Okay.
For I think a small parcel, medium-sized parcel, under a kilo, it's about £3.30. I think for second class.
Okay,
I send large letters, and large letterboxes, second class signed, go for about £2.50.
Okay, nice.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and there's a platform called Parcel to Go, and that's just a comparative platform. So that might be the best.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Any other questions, I guess, regarding that kind of delivery e-commerce side of business? No.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, Jane. Yes, hi.
Sorry. I don't know how relevant it is, but our products are really, really breakable. They're very thin crackers that actually break very easily. Does anybody have experience of a delivery service that's really good for breakable things, please?
Sorry, Jane. If anyone has any, oh, Tara, yes.
I send glass jars, but I just send it through Royal Mail, second class usually, and I just wrap it well with bubble wrap. Or now, if you're looking to be eco-friendly, you can get the cardboard, like sort of thick corrugated stuff. But yeah, everything's more likely to be damaged. But I never have anything damaged. It's usually the courier services that are more expensive that end up damaging the stuff rather than Royal Mail.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Jane, UPS is probably supposed to be the best for sort of, yeah, check them out, but there are a bit more premium though. Yeah.
Out of interest, in terms of general discussion points like this, do people have particular online forums or WhatsApp groups or ways of kind of, I guess, answering some of these questions? I know I'm part of a few different WhatsApp groups, but just out of interest, where people kind of source community information about these kind of things as well.
Well, there's Food Hub, right, on Facebook.
Okay.
Yep.
Brilliant. Any other kind of, I guess, generalist points in terms of particular challenges that you guys are facing in this sector, going outside of the pivot angle and e-commerce angle? Yes, Pravin. Okay,
the thing I would really like other people's sort of opinion or feedback on is I have no idea how we're going to open, and everyone's furloughed. We're in a train station, and obviously we're unique in the sense that we're in a train station, but there's no one coming through the train station at all, and the government are actively encouraging people not to get the train. And I'm just thinking, like, when we open, how we do it, who do we bring back on from furlough? How do you decide who to bring back? Because I want to try and make it as fair as possible. But I'm fairly confident that we're going to have to make people redundant. It feels like it's inevitable, really. And I just kind of want to know what's going on for other people who have coffee shops, really, like how are they going to approach this, and whether they're doing something already. So what we're going to do is we're going to open for takeaway coffee only on the first day, whilst other people come in and get the food areas ready to start trading, and then we're going to be starting to do as much takeaway as possible, which we do anyway. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what other people are doing and how they're managing sort of their staff coming back to work and how they stay in touch with them and how regularly. It's quite a lot there, sorry.
No, very relevant point. Would anyone like to come back on that point? Yes, Emma.
Yeah, we're facing literally exactly the same, especially who to unfurlough to begin with, how much revenue you're going to get in to be able to pay the staff that you've got in if you're going to start doing takeaways and things like that. And I think that's my main concern. Also, the safety of my staff, like how many is safe enough to come back to cook the food, to make the coffees. So we're facing really similar challenges, and also because our customers are generally in the most vulnerable sort of ages and things like that, quite a lot of them are shielded. So we'd have to think about maybe doing deliveries and takeaway as well. And yeah, it's really difficult because you don't know who's going to be out there, I suppose, like at the beginning, and what to do and how many people are going to be about, because there's going to be a lot of vulnerable people that are just going to be scared to go out. And that's another reason why we've tried to keep in touch as many customers as possible to make sure that they're okay. And that's our main concern, really, and the staff. So I do like daily Zoom calls to my staff, just like an open Zoom call to make sure that they can come in and whenever they want, like an hour a day, to sort of talk to them about like how they're getting through lockdown rather than work most of the time, just to keep them going. And yeah, I don't really have an answer. That's why we sort of came on the call, I think, because we've got all these problems with not too many solutions, because no one knows when we're going to be able to reopen and what it's going to look like. Sorry, that's not really answering any of your questions, but I'm just relating to you.
I suppose just jumping onto that as well, Emma, is the conversations that the government are having about part furloughing. And about dropping the furlough payments to 60%, but people can come back and work part-time. And of course we're living in a series of unknowns because they haven't decided. So I feel that we kind of have to just trip along and wait and see, which cuts down our planning time. So we don't have a date that we can open, we don't have a date that the furlough schemes reduces, which I'm expecting it will do, but also in terms of management and going forward and cash flow planning, do we work on serious worst case scenario, Bill, if we're not going to have any income until November, which is quite a long way in advance. But Emma's exactly right. Do we need to look after those staff and keep communicating with them, but also encouraging people to come in when they're scared to do so?
It's tricky.
Oh, sorry.
Vicky, carry on.
Just to add to that, I think the part furlough scheme is end of August, 1st of September, from what I've heard in the industry. But also, with the approach we're taking with the unfurloughing is it's a pretty open approach with which staff members do feel comfortable coming back to work. So we've had some staff members that have to start, ideally should be starting on the 1st of June. No one in our team was willing to start on the 1st of June. It was a very open conversation where they just said, we're just not comfortable. And that for me, we were undivided, where my COO thought, oh no, everyone would want to be in a rush to go back on the 1st. Actually, a lot of them are still looking after older relatives and are still a bit scared. And then we've also done it with anyone who can cycle in or doesn't need to get public transport to come into the cafes or to work, are the first to come back, because they're the ones that actually do feel safest coming back because they don't have to do public transport. So Pravin, that might be, I know Portsmouth's slightly different, but that might be for you, it's the staff members that feel like they can get to you quite safely without risking other people or themselves, might be a good place to start. And then we've kind of done it the same way, where everyone's been furloughed but at different times. So you get furloughed for 3 weeks, come back for 3 weeks, furloughed for 3 weeks, come back for 3 weeks. And we'll probably do that the same thing with people part-time. And we're kind of just asking them what they want to do. Like, do people want to take voluntary redundancy? Do people want to be furloughed? Do people want to come back part-time? And I was quite surprised at how open people were as to where their heads were at.
Yeah. Any other points, I guess, on the return to work?
I was just going to ask,
Sorry, yes.
Just the very specifics. I was on a call recently where they were talking about preparing offices and things for return to work, and honestly it didn't really apply to a coffee shop, but it's got me thinking about the very, very practical things of marking floors, for the 2 meters or so on, or the perspex screens. We just have one. What we have done is open a hatch for takeaway coffees, and I've got one member of staff back because she was happy to do it. And she was quite bored at home, quite frankly. So she was very happy to come in and do her barista gig. And so we've done that. And like, we're not getting a huge amount of customers, but it's really just to sort of keep our brand there and to try and just keep our engagement there. And people are happy to see it. But I'm sort of thinking, yes, playing the long game, I expect it's going to be a very long time. So I'm trying to think of, how do I lay out the floor in terms of do we have to like booth off each table? Do we have to have screens in place? What's the mechanics of face masks? We're all about creativity, so I've been making face masks for myself and staff, and if anybody's looking to buy them, we can make them to order, sort of a thing. But I'm just trying to think that sort of stuff. How do we work through that? Is there any guidance anywhere on where we're going to have to work, what we're going to have to comply with? I'm assuming food hygiene and health and safety is going to be stepped up massively. So how do we start even thinking about that?
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of a heads up on that. I'm expecting that EHO are going to be ramping up their testing, and just taking advice from another country that's all of a sudden reopened cafes and places like that. So New Zealand have literally opened, I think it was this week, and they have the 3 S's that they have to run with, which is your customers must be segregated, seated and served. which enables minimal contact with people. And I think that's quite a smart way of doing it. If you can segregate and seat and then serve them rather than having lots of traffic around, might enable, you know, a bit more of that social distancing. But I know for shops, etc., the government have been really clear in setting out what you should have and the risk assessments that you need to put in place, and also fines if you don't. So I'm hoping that in terms of hospitality, they'll do the same.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you. Any last points? Sorry, couldn't see everyone. Okay. Any other last points, I guess, before we close up this side of the discussion and then move on to pass over to Catherine? No? Brilliant. Catherine, I think I'm over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you so much to UnLtd for having me today. And thank you all for being here and for sharing. It's been really interesting hearing your stories, and I hear the frustration. It's you know, I think a lot of people are finding this time particularly hard. We've got very few guidelines to go on. So just a bit of background about me. I've got 20 years retail experience. I spent 17 years in larger retailers such as Paperchase, for example. And then I left there a couple of years ago to start my own business, and I run a small consultancy called Future Retail Consulting. I've done some work with quite a few UnLtd members, so quite a few social enterprises, and I also run a membership called the Resilient Retail Club, which I just launched partly as a reaction to the struggles that I've seen people going through during the coronavirus. And I just want to start off with a bit of context of what I've seen overall. And I think that what's really interesting about this time is that we've kind of got two different trends happening. Well, not trends, maybe not the right word. Two different major forces impacting. On the one hand, we've got this clearly the huge impact of lockdown. I was reading a statistic that said, you know, 40% of all food spend, for example, in the UK was happening outside the home prior to lockdown. And then, of course, almost all of that spend then goes into the home with lockdown. So the impact on the hospitality industry is huge, as well as obviously on the food supply chain. So, you know, it was interesting because, you know, we think about food hoarding when we think about the supermarkets running out of things, but actually part of it is just simply that all that money that was being spent outside has gone inside. But then at the same time, the other trend that's happening, which personally I feel very optimistic about, is the movement towards conscious consumerism, the movement towards people looking to support businesses that have meaning, have purpose. And actually, I think the move to support local. So I think that what will be very interesting coming out of this time is the combination of those two things and how everyone weathers the storm. And frankly, if I was to choose between weathering the storm as a major chain or as a small independent, even though obviously as small independents we have issues around resources and accessing resources, I think the consumer or the customer sentiment is going to be massively stacked towards social enterprise and businesses with purpose. So I feel, and also local as well, because I think people are going to want to look to stay more local. And I think, obviously I'm no COVID-19 expert, but my sense is that this is going to be a kind of progressive release from lockdown, and then in the winter there may even be another tightening again. I mean, if you see the way that they're talking about offices, it's very tentative. There's no real clear timescale that everyone will be back. And will everyone ever go back? Who knows? You know, this could be the catalyst to accelerate lots of changes in society, including, say, working from home, which again all plays into supporting the kind of shop local as well. So there's just a few things that I kind of wanted to share with you that I've seen from across the industry. And also partly as well, drawing on some of my experiences. I have been in the industry, as I said, for a long time, So I have been through, although obviously COVID-19 is on a completely different scale, it's nothing that any of us have ever seen before, but there are some parallels that you can draw from the 2008 Lehman Brothers crisis and the financial crash, and maybe even not particularly the same exact circumstances, but the way that people reacted to them. And that's really what I just wanted to run through for the next sort of 10-15 minutes, is just some ways that people have reacted to the situation that have been beneficial to them. So I also just wanted to talk a little bit about the customer right now, and in terms of what we're seeing in why are people still buying, because people are definitely still spending money. They are spending money in very different ways than they were previously. They are definitely spending money with, as Jamie had touched on previously, the number of people shopping online clearly has gone up massively, but also they are spending it with smaller businesses. So I don't know if any of you who sell online actually use Shopify as your platform, for example. But Shopify is sort of known as the small business e-commerce platform. A large number of people sell through it. And what's incredible is actually, if you look at the Shopify as a company, its market value has doubled in the last 60 days. And it's now more valuable. So what was it? I think it was sort of like Dell computers and some really big US companies, that it has become a lot more valuable than those companies, because so many people are moving online, so many small businesses are moving online, and some small businesses are having just unbelievable sales, particularly people who've got a strong digital presence, who are purpose-led, who are really tapping into what the customer's buying right now. So if we think about what is the customer buying right now, well, it broadly is falling into three main categories. People are buying to protect, so protect being protecting their way of life. So the coffee roasting example was perfect. So as Pravin was saying, sales of coffee makers, bread makers, people are purchasing things to allow them to try and recreate the experiences they were having outside of lockdown. They're purchasing to recreate those. Protect also covers food, so that's having food for your family, anything to do with self-care and health, for example. All of those spendings have gone up massively. So people are really looking to protect their way of life, protect their families, protect their health. That's a really, really powerful motivator. So in terms then of how that looks for hospitality in particular, then as Pravin's highlighted, then it's that people buying the roasted coffee, but there's also, I was reading, for example, deliveries or searches for home delivered cream teas had gone up incredibly, huge spike in demand. People wanting to, again, okay, so if it's your birthday, so can you have something delivered to allow you to have a nice meal, that kind of thing. So Protectors is a really, really strong motivator for customers right now. The other reason people are purchasing is to connect. So connect with people literally, as in electronically, so sales of smartphones, computers, all of those sort of things have gone up massively. But then also connect covers gifting. And gifting, I have to say, in terms of from a retail perspective, and it'd be interesting to hear if it's something that you have seen from food gifting as well, but that has been massive. So people are seeing huge rises in the number of orders that are being sent, where the delivery address is different from the purchasing address. People who've been able to offer wrapping or cards or some kind of gifting element to the purchases have seen huge spikes. People selling food hampers. I have a client who sells vegan food hampers who's just literally not been able to keep that in stock. But so connection is really, really important, whereas previously you've been able to drop in and talk to your friend or your visit with people. You can't even really do that. I mean, obviously I know it's loosened up a bit, so there's sort of the socially distant in a park, maybe you can talk to them, but it's still not quite the same. And then the final one then is to distract. So distract is about distracting yourself or your children, for example, if you're homeschooling. And you can see that in the rise of things like crafting. Recipe boxes definitely fits into that category. People looking to learn new skills, people looking to have an activity, something to do. And when you kind of combine that distract and that connect, so gifts of recipe boxes, for example, that's like a really winning formula, and lots of people have seen that. So there is money being spent. Obviously a lot of that is shifting online, but there are very clear customer motivations, which is, useful to know for now. And I guess my only thought about what the future is going to hold is, if you've been holding off thinking about an online element because of the imminence of reopening, it feels to me that the businesses that are going to continue to combine the two can continue to work on their online presence as well as looking to reopen their physical premises. It's going to be, you're not going to regret that. It's going to be a winning formula, because I think, number one, that the way that people are buying online has really been accelerated by the situation, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But number two, I don't think that it's going to be once and done. I don't think everything's going to reopen and stay open necessarily. It could be something that fluctuates. So in terms then of kind of mindset, or where as business owners that you are and where you want to be, obviously it's very difficult because you're dealing with a large number of unknowns. But there's definitely two reactions to this type of situation. And in all honesty, the fact that you're all on this call and looking for answers suggests that you are very much in there's two mindsets, basically: stuck in fear or being focused on action. And the fact that you're all here suggests that you are very much in that focused on action. So I'm certainly not going to try and sell that to you, as clearly you're already there. And part of being focused on action is about then unturning. There's a great phrase, it's like, picking up the rocks and looking at the squirmy things underneath. So trying to be really, really clear about where you are in your business, and in all honesty, what a worst case scenario looks like. It's a very useful exercise to do, to plan out a worst case scenario. It doesn't sound like it. Sounds like it's a bit of a nightmare, but if you've done it and you've got it, it's always better the devil you know. So then really after that, it's about focusing on what does a plan of action look like. And in an ideal world, a plan of action has got to be flexible, because as we know, things could come in and out, things could happen. We're constantly getting updates from the government in terms of guidelines. But if you at least start with a plan of action and what you'll want to do now and what you want to do in the longer term, at least you've got a framework that you can then adjust as you go down the road. So there's a couple of things that can really help when you're putting together a plan of action, because obviously it's sort of like a big nebulous thing that you have to work on. So the first one is to spend a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, brainstorming about what was working really well before the coronavirus, before lockdown. What was it about your business that was actually doing really well? What was positive? Take time to celebrate the positives. And there's two reasons for that. Number one is that focusing on what's been working really well definitely helps with that action focus and gets you into the kind of mindset moving forward. But secondly, it also helps you identify what you want to keep from the business that you don't want to lose, because the great phrase is, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't want to be so focused on where you're taking the business that you forget about the things that were really working, and ideally, thinking about why they were working really well. And if you've seen positive things come from after lockdown, which I don't want to assume that nobody's had positives, because there have been a lot of people who've been able to pivot and see great reaction to certain revenue streams, or be able to have those pivots, then it's really important you identify those as well. So kind of what was working really well pre-lockdown and what's been working since. Then the other element, the flip side of that, is thinking about what were your areas of development, again, and thinking about that, splitting that in two. So for example, what do you know? We've all got, as business owners, we've all got that sort of slight laundry list of things that we know weren't working as well as we would like them to be working. And so it's really useful for you to kind of note those things down and get a sense of, okay, is it that you need to do some more PR, or you know that your online presence isn't quite where you wanted it to be? What is it that you know that you want to work on? And then the second piece is, what has lockdown shown you? Is it that actually your staff aren't as engaged as you'd like them to be? Is it showing you that again, your digital presence is something that you really have to focus on? So you kind of want to get those sense of, right, what do I need to work on? And then ultimately the big driver is, what are you going to do now? What are your opportunities? So thinking about your opportunities for not just for reopening, but then how can you reopen and how can you develop the business, and are there other things that you can pivot on, and long term, looking sort of into that 12 to 18 months where you want to go, and really identifying, almost if you look back in 12, 18 months, like what do you want to have done? Like, what do you want your business to be looking like in that 12 to 18 months? And then what steps do you need to get there? So clearly, obviously, a big part of that is reopening. And I think that there's lots of elements about reopening. Obviously, there's going to be the government guidelines. I think that a big piece of the reopening, though, is going to come back to bringing it back to your customers. What's going to make your customers feel really comfortable? And, to what extent can you involve your customers in the conversation about reopening as well? So if you've got an engaged customer base that you talk to through email, or I love the weekly coffee calls, or through your social media, to what extent can you involve them in the plans for reopening and ask them their thoughts? And so much of it then is going to be about making them feel comfortable. So whether or not it's the floor signage to give spaces, I've seen a lot of people talking about removing fixtures, for example, to allow more of a flow around a smaller premises. Window signs, hand sanitizer stations, all of those things. What will make your customer feel comfortable? And probably the best people to ask about what's going to make them feel comfortable is your customers. So involving them in the process, involving them in that process of thinking about what comes next, and where do they want to, what's going to help encourage them. And then the other point that I wanted to make as well is that your reopening, although it's very much personal to you as your business, it does also happen in the context of your local community. So I'd love to know how many of you have sort of been working with other businesses in your local community about reopening, because it is going to come down to an area feeling reopened, and also people having a reason to come and visit, and that's going to be magnified if not just you're open, but other people are open as well. So I've been having a conversation with some business improvement districts, some landlords who, for example, own most of the retail in town, and they're very much looking at this reopening as a collective. So they're thinking about not just individual businesses opening, but doing it in a way that is a collective, that is a community effort. And also, to what extent can you give it a little bit of a celebratory feel, which is maybe counterintuitive, because obviously this has been a very difficult time, but actually examples from other places in the world have suggested that where they've almost been like, okay, this is a celebration. Again, it's sort of given a bit of a buzz and a reason for people to start thinking about it. So those were my key points really, is that people are still buying, they're buying for very particular reasons, and as business owners it's about thinking about what's been working, what your areas of development are, how can you tap into those new and different ways of purchasing, but then also how can your reopening be right for your customer, always starting with the customer, putting them first, and then also how can it work as part of a larger initiative maybe in your local area. So I'm going to stop talking for now, and I'd love to hear from you guys, in terms of reopening, especially around the piece with other people, if that's been something that you've got the opportunity to do, to talk to other people about reopening.
Hey everyone, so I'm Julius, I'm from Second Shot Coffee. We have specialty coffee shops that employ people affected by homelessness in Bethnal Green and in Westminster. And so what we've done is we've had got a couple of WhatsApp groups with local business owners. And so we've just been constantly kind of talking about what our plans are in terms of reopening, and we're looking at collaborating as well in terms of if there's any kind of outdoor festival or event that we can do to kind of mark the fact that, like you say, the area is reopened and is safe to do so as well. And we've also just been kind of sharing if we've got any friends who have new products that we can share on our socials and stuff like that. And also if there's any new kind of suppliers that have popped up in that can produce any PPE or produce any any like hand wash stations and stuff like that, which has been super helpful, because I think like you said, Catherine, it is going to be important that when you open, it's what your customers think as well, whether they think it's going to be safe or not. And I think obviously if you're not opening in isolation, if you're opening alongside or at similar dates as a couple of other businesses, and they can, all the local area can see that everyone's taking it seriously and that it's safe to do so, then I think that should help all of us.
Fantastic, thank you, Julius. Has anyone else been involved in something like that, like a community effort?
We're not, but we are part of a business improvement district. So I don't think there's any harm in us getting hold of we're in the middle of a city centre in Plymouth, so there's no harm, I don't think, in getting hold of our city centre company that runs the business improvement district and get everyone together. But I think it would be great if that came from us. But yeah, something I'll take forward that's really useful.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that some, I don't know how they are in general, but I do get the impression that some business improvement districts are really kind of grappling the challenge and grabbing it with both hands. And some of them are maybe a little bit more resistant or just not resistant. That's not the right word. Just not sure. As I said, we're just dealing with this huge amount of uncertainty that as business owners we're uncertain, but as I imagine for business improvement districts and local councils, they were all kind of in the same situation. So I think that if we can be almost slightly pioneers or pushing the agenda or just asking the question, it'd be more powerful as a combination.
I wanted to say something. I'm here with Brian. I don't know if he's made the meeting. East Brighton Food Co-op. Hi.
Hi.
We kind of set up, we haven't started the co-op, it's kind of started late because we've ended up sort of creating an emergency food hub. So we've had to deal with a lot of distancing and hygiene issues and PPE sort of for the last 2 months. And I can just say, you just can't be clean enough, really. Everybody likes to see everybody keeping everything really clean and pushing the distancing and saying about distancing so that people don't feel uncomfortable and people naturally, we've noticed, they naturally draw towards you, even though we all know we're supposed to be distancing. And I would just push that you just clean everything all the time, non-stop, and make sure people are cleaning and keeping clean, and the customers know it, the staff know it. We're all volunteers and everybody knows what's going on, and check the top end information on what's needed. I mean, we clean pens, everything gets cleaned. And all our food, we cook it fresh there, and we have to be careful. There's only a few people in the kitchen. It's all the social distancing means everything is slower. Well, we work quite quickly, but you always got you're a few people down because of social distancing, and you would be as well with customers, I suppose. And it's just keeping it all clean. And some people get more nervous than others. And a lot of people haven't been out, and so they're really, really nervous about who is keeping distancing, what's being cleaned and what isn't. And yeah, I would just push the cleaning is so important, and the distancing. And we do the masks, and some people do and some people don't. I'm not quite sure where, but like if you're out and you're serving people, masks is, I think everybody should wear masks, but I don't know if they're going to.
Right.
So it makes people very nervous if they don't see people cleaning services. And our food is in microwave pots, and so everything gets microwaved, which is also helps with hygiene. So yeah, carry on cleaning.
Narita, did you want to say something?
Sorry, I just had a question on the cleaning. Yeah, I was kind of hoping today might be the time just for talking about that sort of stuff, because that's been on my mind. Obviously with the coffee shop and retail with it. I know it is very much a secondary issue. I get that, because obviously we're dealing with like potentially death, you know, with the virus. But I've just been really, really concerned about the amount of land waste that's been created with all the PPE that's been disposed and things like that. So I wondered, anybody thought about environmentally friendly ways of doing all that cleaning and sanitizing? You know, instead of having, you know, like the face masks, that we would wash them instead of dumping them, and you know, is it sufficient to, you know, to wash things in a hot dishwasher? Is that sufficient rather than having disposable things? You know, has anybody put any thought into that? No.
Well, I've been using I mean, lots of people are making masks, and the disposable ones really for the NHS and for anyone who's in really doing, and like the carers is doing a lot of interaction and spending more time with, basically the longer time you spend with people, the more frequently you would need to change the mask. But the cloth ones seem pretty good to me, and like I just chuck them in, boil the kettle, put it in hot water, wash it as soon as I come in, change it daily, might change it twice a day depending, but they're good. And if you wear a mask, it makes people keep their distance. It reminds everyone.
Yeah.
And that's quite important. So even, I mean, often you have to pull it down because people can't hear you. We've dealt with a lot of people who are elderly, and you have to, you know, you need to kind of be adaptable and keep your distance and be able to communicate. So, I mean, you know, I was sort of thinking there's no aeroplanes, lots of people aren't driving. We've been more, it's got to be clean, you know, bleach is good, and kind of the sanitizer, and using the best stuff that definitely works pre being too eco with it, because at the moment, I'm just veering on the side of caution with cleaning. Sorry, is it me?
Has anyone else sort of been grappling with this disposable versus?
So I obviously run an eco-friendly business. I make reusable menstrual products because plastic pollution is real and it's horrific, and the disposable, I feel like we've completely taken a step back through COVID, that people were so conscious initially about the plastic and the waste, and now we're at the point where people are getting deliveries, and people are getting food deliveries in plastic tubs and throwaway items, and it's awful. And I really hope that if you are doing deliveries, that you are using eco-friendly packaging, or if you're not, if that's something that you can consider. Eco-friendly packaging, if you have to go disposable, there is eco alternatives. And when it comes to cleaning, you still can get the results that you want with cleaning cloths that then you can hot wash, just like you're hot washing your masks. You can hot wash your cleaning cloths. You can get alternative anti-bacs that without rebuying the plastic trigger bottles. You can get some where you just drop the little things into the thing, mix it with water, and it is reducing that plastic waste. So I completely think everybody should be trying to reduce that waste, especially as places like the NHS and carers will have increased their plastic waste already, that we as small businesses should be trying to reduce hours as much as possible to offset that.
Yeah, can I just say, we very much are doing our best with that, and we get a lot of our tubs back, and we are storing those. We're not using those, and again, this is all a safety issue, but a lot of people give them back to us. We do a swapsies, but we are so far more concerned about the safety aspect at the moment. So that's all to be used later. Most of them have come back to us. So we want to recycle, and we do our best with it. And it is something that we've been looking at. But
we used to have a brilliant little pub just down the road from where we lived, and we used to get a takeaway Sunday dinner from there every so often. And what they'd do is we would take our own plates in, and she would dish them up on our own plates, and then we'd take them away. So there was no cost to her to provide a takeaway service, and there was no packaging, there was nothing that we wouldn't have used ourselves anyway.
I think that's brilliant if everyone can bring their own cup, mugs, plates, glass, everything really, knives and forks even.
And that's something that can continue as well. I mean, I've seen cafes that have, if people have forgotten their reusable mug or things, that they have a basket where people have donated. Everybody's got tons of old mugs in the backs of the cupboards, and they have baskets where people can take a mug and just replace it or take it home. Or I think that's a really lovely idea for a lot of you cafe owners.
Yeah,
I think it's a lot of this. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think this is a really interesting conversation that you can have with your customers as well. And I think my advice would be, don't shy away from having that conversation in terms of asking them, asking them. But if you've got, we could do this or this. What do you think? But also, I just think generally just sharing the story with them, so for those of you that are active on social media, doing the behind the scenes, like this is us getting ready to reopen. These are all of the things that we're putting into place. These are all of the things that we're thinking about. We're trying to balance the eco nature of disposables, for example, versus the need to keep our customers safe. And I think that trust factor is going to be huge with reopening. Like, customers have got to trust you. You've got to trust that that by coming to you that they're going to be taken care of. And I think often people are nervous about showing them behind the scenes because they think you almost have to present this finished product or this finished situation. But actually, I think often showing the thought processes and showing the dilemmas that you're going through and the things that you're thinking about and the things that you're putting into place are actually really powerful ways to keep that connection and to build anticipation for reopening and also explain what you're doing. I think that explanation is going to be really, really important. Is there anything that people we've talked, I think is obviously a really key important topic, but is there anything else that people have maybe we've not covered yet that people want to talk about, that they came on this call hoping to get other people's opinions or insight into?
Can we talk about cash flow and landlords?
Absolutely.
I'm interested in how people what their relationship is like with their landlord, whether their landlords are still asking for rent and how they're managing their cash flow. To update you on my situation, before this all happened, we were on a really bad sort of terms with our landlord because we were on a turnover-based rent. But sort of being on a turnover-based rent now really works in our favour because we're not turning over any money, so we're not paying any rent. But cash flow, I've always been quite on our numbers, so I forecasted until the beginning of August, and obviously there's no sort of activity at the moment, so I kind of know roughly what's going to be in the bank. I know how long we can kind of last for, but I think it would be just quite helpful just to sort of know how people are sort of doing it in creative ways of doing things. I've actually just been paying all the tax because I'd rather not sort of owe people money. So I've paid everyone, and I'm paying all the tax as I go. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear how other people are doing and whether there's anything creative that they're doing to sort of navigate this period.
Okay.
Evan, I'd love to say that I've got some creative answers. If only we had. Our landlord, basically we're just having these monthly conversations. So at the moment I'm still paying my rent, and I have service charges on top of that I have to pay, but I'm still keeping the conversation open. It's unlikely, I think, that they're going to give us any rent-free periods. And like you, I'm really mindful that I just don't want to kick the can down the road a little bit, because I'm also very mindful as a city centre company, you know, our takings go down in January anyway because it's cold and not many people go out. And I'm really mindful that actually if I just kick that down a little bit further down the road, you know, come February, March time, that's going to really struggle. I normally forecast sort of 2 years in advance, which allows me to do that. But we've been open 3 years. It was just our 3rd birthday, so we just got to a point of sustainability when we had to shut, which is really blimmin' frustrating. But and I'm more than happy. Our landlord's very much like, look, if you need a conversation and you want to just, you know, just pause it for a little while, then we can. But I'm, like I said, I'm really mindful about that flow, and I don't really want to get into a position where I'm going to struggle mid next year because I've got no revenue. And also to be really mindful that I'm going to need some revenue to open, in terms of stock, etc., because our stocks will have gone to nothing. So I'm also really mindful that there's an element of trying to save some of that money so that we can open successfully.
Thank you, Kate. Is anyone else? How's everyone else's relationships with their landlords? Has anyone got particularly supportive, particularly unsupportive?
Okay.
Hi,
Can
Sam.
I ask people that's sort of related?
Sorry, go on. Sorry, Narita, I'll go back to you.
So you go, Narita, and then Sam, if you want to jump in after.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, quick one. I think very related to this is the question of the grant. I suppose if people might be willing to say how many people have got grants, because I haven't, and so my conversation with my landlord is horrendous basically at the moment because we have no income to be able to pay rent. So I'm just curious to see how many of you guys have been able to get any grants.
Yeah, we didn't get a grant either. We were our rateable value is £2,000 over the threshold, so we lost out, which again a little bit frustrating. But again, the council is looking at discretionary grants. I think the terms have just come out for the most recent discretionary grants, and I've had lots of conversations with our economic development team at the council just to say, actually stick me on the list, because I'd be really grateful for a bit of that so that I can pay my rent. But also going back to them with, you know, yes, we might be shut, but we're doing this for the community while we're shut. So we keep those conversations going with those that are making those decisions about those discretionary grants.
Yeah, just on the subject of cash flow planning, I was just going to add that I suppose fortunately, because a lot of our businesses benefited from all the units are below £12,000 anyway, so all of which have got rate relief in place and are either retail, leisure or hospitality, so that our businesses have been able to benefit from that. We've a kind of a weird one. We kind of, I suppose, act as a landlord for a lot of our as the landlord for our businesses. The problem has been, what's the realistic opening time for us? You know, some of our businesses might turn over in excess of £10,000, which is the grants that they've been getting on a monthly basis. Clearly, that's, you know, no staff costs on that grant. It's not stock, so it's a good amount of money for a lot of businesses. The reality can get any other revenue, but it's if, and I know that some of the narrative seems to have changed in the last couple of days, that the aim is to try and get things moving for July for hospitality businesses. But if that goes into, you know, August, September, I mean, ourselves as a business, we're driven by the summer months. So if that, and you mentioned it as well, Kate, in terms of the importance of trying to extrapolate over even potentially a couple of years. For ourselves, our landlord is the city council, who have not been that helpful because we've been squeezing in our current lease, which is meant to be extended for a couple of years as of July, which means that they've been trying to squeeze in 2 annual rent payments into that period of time, and haven't been very helpful. So for us, the kind of aim has been, while we've benefited slightly with some grants, has been, what does the picture look like if there's a delay in the opening for hospitality or retail venues until, you know, autumn or winter, you know, and where's the financial support? And what we've been saying to our businesses is try and get through until certainly until July, and see if there is any substantial hold-ups to reopening. Then there might be, and again, it's all wishful thinking. Potentially additional support offered to businesses, but that's obviously not guaranteed. So it's been trying to work through what we can, what we know, and then try and look to the future as best as we can and try and plan from that. But it's really difficult for a lot of our businesses to be able to map out what post-June looks like, really.
I don't know if there's any benefit in the context of the conversation, but you can't actually be kicked out. I know that much. If that's any relief, if at the moment, if you're not able to pay your rent, if that's the only reason you're not, if that's the only thing you're not meeting in your lease, then you're actually landlords can't actually kick you out, which is something I've had to find out, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. So you can't actually be kicked out. Yeah. No, I think it is really difficult with as we've all talked about, to know how to plan. But I think that's where an element of it has to be. What does the worst case scenario look like, and then what other revenue streams have you maybe tried, or could you try, or sort of a bit of a contingency plan, which is difficult because obviously those take time to develop, but it may well be worth thinking about it, or even just on a longer term basis thinking about that second revenue stream, or basically non-premises based revenue stream. What does that look like? Julius?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah, headphones weren't working. Just to come in on the landlord arrangement. So it's been interesting for us, and it's interesting to hear you say, Sam, about that your landlord's a council, because ours is as well in one of our shops. And so with Westminster, I think we were quite lucky because we kind of had a local community organizer who pulled together 150 odd businesses who we all kind of sent a joint letter in March saying that we wanted this rent-free period till June, which is what we've got. And now we're looking at what arrangement we can going forward, and we're looking at a kind of stepped, so 25% for 3 months, then 50% rent, then 75 and 100, which is really good. But then for our other shop, it's just a private landlord, and that kind of negotiation was a lot more difficult. And I think as well, what was interesting is that because he's in Bolivia, so he was kind of a month behind before he kind of realized how serious the situation was. And so now we're kind of able to have a lot more realistic conversations. But it is just so difficult because with us, we were doing takeaway only before we closed. But our sales were so down that the level of rent became unrealistic. So it's now just trying to kind of negotiate our way around that when we're looking to reopen.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really interesting. So the collective was really useful when you're dealing with a council, at least. We've just got a couple of minutes left before I hand it back to Jamie to wrap things up. So has anyone got any questions or anything that they wanted to talk about we've not covered so far? Emma?
I just wanted to add really quickly, when we were talking about the safety of the customers and the customers trusting us, and that all starts with the staff. So unless you've got confident staff that are feeling safe and in their environment and everything else, you're not going to have confident, feeling safe customers. So I think for me, that's the most important thing. And I'm hoping that passion for people and my staff is going to rub off onto my customers once we do end up reopening, because my staff will be happy and the customers will be hopefully reasonably happy that we've reopened and we're feeling confident, and that will rub off on them. So I think that's really, really important aspect of reopening, is making sure that your staff are comfortable going back to work and with what your plans are and everything else.
Fantastic, thank you. Great point. Ahmed, sorry.
Both work, that's fine. Thanks, Catherine. For me, I'm just wondering whether any of the business models here are pay forward, and just to kind of intrigue to see if the pay forward model has been affected as part of the shift in people's buying behaviors. I know that you mentioned gift buying has been something that was on the increase, but I'm just out of interest, has pay forward, if anybody's got the pay forward model, has that been affected?
Do you mean pay forward as in like vouchers for homeless people, or do you mean pay forward as in you're selling things as a cafe and they're going to reclaim it when they reopen?
I meant the one where you sort of, you pay for somebody else, and that's somebody who's like in need. But actually, I'm interested as well with the other side to it, which is, pay now and come and get your coffee in like 3 months, help your local business stay afloat or something like that. Yeah, that'd be interesting to hear from.
So when we're open, we do the pay forward for homeless people and less fortunate people, like the vouchers go to food banks and the street passes and things like that. Unfortunately, because we're not actually going into the cafe, it's completely closed. They can't redeem them in the cafe. But we are still continuing to let people know about what we do. When we reopen, people can still give us the money, and we'll be able to send the vouchers out and people can reclaim them. And we have actually had a bit of funding recently that's gone towards our pay forward. So we're going to have about £250 that they've put in towards it. So we're going to have quite a few vouchers to be given out when we reopen. But it has massively affected it because we can't make the food or the coffees, which, frustratingly, it's just not safe for us to do so at the minute. So we can take the money from people and we can give it when we reopen the cafe, but at the minute it's just a dead end. But we have, talking about buying things before we open, we've got the option for people to buy gift vouchers. So a lot of our customers are quite vulnerable, so it's quite nice that if their family members buy them like a £5, £10 gift voucher, they can reclaim that once we reopen the cafe and they don't have to spend any money. So we've got that option at the minute as well, but unfortunately the pay forward aspect we can't do, but we will be doing.
But it's interesting as well in Plymouth that we don't have any homeless people that are living on the streets because the council have housed them all. So there's a majority, I think it's somewhere in the region of 97% that were homeless are now housed, which is like a miracle that happens all of a sudden. But but yeah, but it's better than it was. But again, that re-emergence period, I think may well cause a few more options, which will be great for us to be able to support that a bit better.
Yeah.
Pravin, one last point from you.
Sorry, it was just to echo what you said earlier. I think I've noticed we have quite a lot of people who are buying coffee for other people and sending it to another location. And it's not something I've even promoted at all, but it's been quite nice to just see, like, there's some people who keep doing it and keep sending it to loads of people. And I think it's just one of those things that maybe if people have websites and stuff that they want to kind of promote, it is going to be something that I promote more. But I do think that, I don't know, hopefully I'm not being negative, but just I think it's not going to be viable to really have a coffee shop in the same way after this. And I think without a website and having an online aspect to the business, I just can't see how it's going to work. And yeah, so I just think that sort of element of being able to gift someone something and buy it and get it sent to their location without them really knowing, and then it turns up and they feel really good. That's what I've kind of seen, and it's quite cool.
Fantastic, thank you. I think, okay, I'm conscious of time. I know I need to hand back to Jamie to wrap things up, but Julius, do you just want to wrap up one last thing?
Yeah, sorry, I just had a quick question because talking about pay it forward. So we also have a pay it forward system where local rush sleepers can come in and get things free of charge. And I just wondered if anyone else on the call had any thoughts or any plans about making that as safe as possible once we're able to reopen.
I guess it'd be the same as everybody else, isn't it? Would it be any different?
Yeah, I guess so. I was just yeah.
That was I was wondering about sort of, do we have to do things like, I don't know, offices apparently are talking about like putting tape across floor to indicate meter marks, things like that. Do we have to go?
Yeah, I just don't know whether anyone was considering like extra hand washing stations or anything like that specifically for rough sleepers or anyone who might not have access to hand sanitizers or other facilities that people would have at home.
Yeah,
I know, like we have. I mean, even though it was only a hatch, we just have hand sanitizer on the hatch. You know, it's like a little ledge outside, and obviously we're doing it inside. And my thought was just at least if and when people can come in again, that when they're crossing the threshold, at least at that point they're sanitizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's I'll drop it in the comments, but there's a website called Socially Distancing Kits, which a lot of people I know who with retail businesses have been talking about them, because they've got the signage. They've got some ones which are sort of rainbow themed and Together We're Stronger, and it's kind of lots of things about keep hands clean, keep distant, floor markings, things like that, but sort of in a slightly more upbeat, positive way. So it's, you know, slightly less dystopian. I'll pop it in just if that's helpful. Right, well, thank you so much. Well, I'm going to hand it back over to Jamie to wrap things up. Thank you so much for all your comments. It's been really fascinating, and yeah, I look forward to seeing what happens with reopening.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Catherine.
Thank you.
So yeah, just to quickly wrap up, I guess some of the kind of key points that I heard during this call. It's fantastic to hear, I guess, about some of the pivots and successes some of the businesses had during that, particularly in terms of, I think Tara mentioned the recipe kits, but also pivots and support for beneficiaries as well, in terms of, you know, weekly catch-up calls with those people you're normally engaged with. So that was pretty inspiring to hear. Lots of questions around e-commerce, delivery options, and then options for cafes as well. So great to hear examples of also supporting local economy through taxi as a means to delivery. I know there's lots of practical issues, and hopefully we covered most of those on the call. It's, I think, probably really important to also look to kind of other examples. We talked about comparisons to other countries and how they have started to open up. That to me was a really relevant point. In terms of managing finance, there's obviously, you know, huge challenges with rent and other issues like that. One tool that I could recommend is EY have produced a pro bono finance navigator. So it's basically a way for you to work out financial projections. It's normally on a kind of monthly fee-paying basis, but they've opened up for free, so that's quite a good one to look at. And I can chuck that in the chat as well, so you guys can check that out. And then I guess, a couple of final points. I mean, first of all, I was interested particularly around how consumers respond during recessions to ethical and purpose-driven brands. And actually, there's some lessons to learn from previous recessions about how consumers respond. And I know obviously it's particularly tight for a lot of businesses right now. There are some, optimistic signs, as I think Catherine mentioned, in terms of how consumers react and what consumers are looking for. Looking back at, today versus 20 years ago, the ethical market's grown from being a 10 billion market to a 40 billion market, and massively outgrown other standard SMEs. So I think there is potential light in the next few years about where consumer trends are going. So I kind of want to leave in a broader sense in terms of what consumers are looking for. And then I guess my final point was probably more a practical point, which was if you guys wanted to stay in touch and how to manage that going forwards. In terms of practicalities, I'll probably defer to UnLtd about how to kind of share contact details, and there's probably relevant GDPR processes around that. I know for myself, it'd be really great to continue to hear how you guys are getting on. From whatever forum that looks like, happy to step in and provide insight from what we're seeing in Social Supermarket. So thanks everyone for joining, and I don't know if UnLtd, Camilla or Anna, you wanted to say a couple of last words as well.
Oh, we didn't quite plan this. Just very quickly, you guys were all asked if you were okay to share your email addresses with everyone else, and everyone has opted to say yes. So I'm taking that as you guys are happy to be put in touch. And in fact, the Zoom link that was sent round was already shared to everybody, but I will resend an email because, as I mentioned, some people weren't able to join today. And I'll add them because they were also very keen to form part of this group. Other than kind of sharing the video and obviously sharing one another's contacts, UnLtd is really keen for you guys as a group to think about what's the best way going forward. So whether you know, some options that we've tried in the past or people have tried in the past, having a LinkedIn group, you can all share your LinkedIn details, setting up a WhatsApp group, sometimes that's a bit more timely. But really we would encourage you to have a think about how do you best want to stay in touch. And if there are things that come up relevant to this group, we will obviously share with you. But I think that's kind of, this convening is really what UnLtd has done, and we really hope that you take it forward on your own.
I just want to say a big thank you to Catherine and Jamie for helping us host today. And I hope it was useful in some way to everyone. I suppose we'll leave it here. It was really nice to meet some new people virtually, and good luck with everything.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.